Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, some of you may have seen my recent video on Bruckner's Eighth Symphony as part of the Capriccio edition with Marcus Poschner. Very, very fine performance of Bruckner's Eighth. But in that connection, I mentioned the fact that this symphony somehow acquired a nickname, the Apocalyptic. And some others have acquired nicknames too. I have no idea where these came from or who assigned them. But one thing I do know that we can do better. And since Bruckner only had the sense to give one of his symphonies a nickname, I think it is incumbent upon we who care and love him to give the other ones suitably appropriate nicknames. And so I am announcing the Dave Hurwitz YouTube, ClassicsToday.com, Bruckner Symphony nickname competition. You don't win anything, you just get to do it. The idea here is to give all of Bruckner's symphonies, except the School Symphony, which if you want to give a nickname to, you can. I won't, but you can. But to give the Bruckner symphonies nicknames. And not just to give them a nickname, but you have to explain why. I mean, I am dying to hear what you come up with, but you don't have to do all of them. You can do as many as you feel like. And as long as you give me just a line or two about how that nickname got there, because that's so much part of the fun. I mean, anybody can come up with a name, but I mean, you've got to have a reason. There's got to be a legitimate biographical or musical or some kind of justification for the name that you come up with. And as an example, I happen to have my list, which I'm going to go into, and you can then respond with your own entries based on your own experience of this oh so nameable music. Because believe me, some of these may stick, and you will achieve immortality thereby, which I think would be great fun, wouldn't it? Don't you want to be the guy who nicknamed the symphony? And at least then, if your name is the one that sticks, we'll know who did it and where it came from. Unlike the apocalyptic or the philosophical or the tangential or whatever they call these things. It's ridiculous. We need to have attribution. People have to take responsibility for these things, and I stand behind every one of the following names. So, number one, the Phlegmatic. Unquestionably. Why is it the Phlegmatic? Well, it's because Bruckner wrote it, and then he sort of rewrote it. I mean, there was the Linz version and the Vienna version, but the Linz version really isn't the Linz version. It's really the after Linz just moved to Vienna version. So you've got the Linz version, the Vienna version, and the almost Vienna version, the quasi-Vienna version. And so I just called it the Phlegmatic, because no matter how much Bruckner worked on it, nothing changed. It all just sounds the same. It makes no difference at all. The more he worked on it, the less difference it made. And that, to me, is a perfect definition of phlegmatic, which is stolidly unemotional and undemonstrative, and nothing that happens makes any difference. And that is Bruckner's first symphony. Bruckner Symphony number 2, the Dyspeptic. Absolutely dyspeptic. Why? Because Bruckner could never make up his mind about it, and it's the most aggravating Bruckner symphony to listen to, because the Bruckner people, especially Kerrigan, have got their hands on it, and they keep churning out new editions of it. So far, there are like 4 or 5. I mean, do you switch the inner movements around? Do you put a horn thing in the slow movement? Do you do a cut in the finale? Do you change 2 notes in the horn part somewhere? Do you do something with the brass? It's just interminable. Every second, there seems to be another version of the Second Symphony popping out, and it doesn't improve on a further acquaintance at all. I mean, it's not... It's aggravating. Oh, see, I'm getting aggravated just talking about it. So it's absolutely dyspepsia. It's the Dyspeptic Symphony. By the way, all of my names have ick at the end. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I like ick. It's better than yuck. So these are all ick names. Number 3. Oh, no, I'm not number 3 yet. I did number 0. Just for you people who like it. It's the solipsistic. Unquestionably, the solipsistic, because that, of course, means completely narcissistic and self-regarding and egomaniacal. And any composer who would cancel a symphony entirely, call it zero, worthless, but not destroy it, and still sit around with the manuscript or give it to someone as a gift or say, oh, well, I mean, if that isn't solipsistic, what is? It is a completely self-regarding failure of a symphony. And so it's the solipsistic. Now, number three. Number three has two nicknames because it depends which version you're using, because there are, of course, three versions of number three. The first two versions are the ectopic, as in pregnancy. An ectopic pregnancy is one that happens in the wrong place. The egg embeds itself somewhere. That's exactly what happened with Bruckner's third. He laid an egg in the wrong place. I mean, if there was ever a symphony that failed monumentally because it was the wrong thing in the wrong place for the wrong audience, it was Bruckner's third. It was his greatest failure in life. So it's the ectopic for the first two versions, which are legitimate versions. The third, of course, is not ectopic. The third is the cephalopelvic. That's when Schock and those people got their hands on it and chopped up the finale and did all kinds of stuff and truncated it. So what is a cephalopelvic symphony? Well, cephalopelvic pregnancies are ones where the head is too large to fit in the birth canal or something like that. So no way this baby's coming out because its proportions are all wrong. And boy, does that describe that final version of the Third Symphony. It has a really big head and a really sort of small finale. And there ain't no way that it's going to find its way free of the birth canal. So it's the cephalopelvic symphony. Number 4 is the romantic. Of course, Bruckner gave it its own name. We have to respect his wishes in that respect. So I do. The standard version of the fourth is the Romantic Symphony. He always calls it the Romantic Symphony. However, there is that horrible 1888 version published by Benjamin Korstvedt and Gutmann that's been rewritten and that has all kinds of completely unidiomatic stuff added that technically Bruckner accepted to get it published. So that symphony is the Oxymoronic for the 1888 Bruckner 4, because it mixing real Bruckner with faux Wagner and generic German late Romantic conventionality is the epitome of oxymoronicism. So the 1888 fourth is the Oxymoronic. Now, the next 3 symphonies don't have nicknames, and they're only single versions. Number 5 I call the Anaphylactic, as in allergic, toxic shock thing. Because if you don't like Bruckner, if you are allergic to Bruckner, then the 5th Symphony is absolutely going to send you into a coma. It is the most Brucknerian of all the Bruckner symphonies, the strangest of all the Bruckner symphonies, the one that sounds the least like anybody else ever could. And so if you have a real problem with the way Bruckner writes, then the Anaphylactic is the symphony to avoid. Number 5, because it is going to absolutely knock you dead. You're going to need to be on a respirator. You need to have one of those, one of those shot things full of epinephrine just to keep you going. I would be very, very careful when encountering the 5th Symphony. The 6th, on the other hand, is just the opposite. It's Bruckner for people who don't usually like Bruckner. It's the Ergonomic Symphony. Why? Because it's shapely and it's concise for Bruckner. And it just plays very, very beautifully, and it's full of terrific tunes, and while still recognizably the same composer, it has a completely different complexion from the Anaphylactic. So the 6th is the Ergonomic. It's as close as Bruckner got to something with all of its proportions perfectly in order and balanced and just refreshing to listen to. Now, number 7 was, of course, the symphony that made Bruckner's reputation when Nickisch originally performed it. And it's another wonderful symphony for people who, generally speaking, don't like Bruckner, at least for the first couple of movements, I would say. The finale can be problematic. But for that reason, I call it the Hypoallergenic. It's just the opposite of the Anaphylactic. It's the one that you don't have to worry about. It's not going to activate any of your musical allergies when you listen to it. You just let it flow over you, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Totally beautiful and lyrical and pleasant and generally easy on the ear, and you can leave after the slow movement, because the first two movements, the slow movement comes second. So, if you don't want to hear the rest of it, you can always go. You can just get up and leave, and it will be completely hypoallergenic as a listening experience. Now we have two versions of the eighth. One lousy original one and a really terrific second one. So the lousy original one is definitely the Neurasthenic, because it's just a mess. It's a big, sort of blowsy, flaccid, irritable, quasi, tense, minor keyish, troubled. It doesn't know what it is, basically. But it's neurasthenic. That's what it is. And so that's the nickname for the first version. The second version sort of got tidied up and cleaned up and scored much more effectively, and with the repetitions somewhat cut down. And the result, I think, is far more powerful and energetic while being basically similar expressively. So I would call it the Frenetic. And it has that neurotic character that gives it a certain edge and an urgency that's completely lacking in the first version. So I think frenetic is the appropriate term for that one. And finally, we come to number 9. And number 9 was easy. Number 9 has got to be the forensic. Why is it forensic? Well, because Bruckner died, it wasn't finished, and everybody else has been trying to figure out how to do it ever since. So it's investigative. It's using scientific techniques of investigation to try and resolve the problem of the finale. Now, forensic, of course, forensic investigation, of course, let me try and get the order of words correctly there, is often used in criminology. And I think that's also appropriate, because there can be no greater crime than the results of most people's attempts to finish that finale. I mean, it's absolutely a criminal act. So I have no problem with that at all. So the 9th is the forensic. And those, my friends, are the nicknames of all the Bruckner symphonies. So the door is open for you to weigh in with your own brilliant, I know they're going to be brilliant, fabulous choices. I'm dying to see what they are. So pick your symphony, pick one, pick all of them, do it however you want, but give me a nickname and give me a line or two as to how you came up with it. I'm dying to see what's going to happen, and then let's let the universe decide if we've gotten any of them right and if they stick. I can hardly wait to find out. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.